Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service of Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father J. Friedel.
Good morning and welcome back to Faith in Our Hometown. We're glad you've joined us for another Sunday morning of discussing issues that matter to us as people of faith here in the greater Joplin area. This morning my guest is going to be Aaron Brown, who's the lead pastor at St. Paul's United Methodist Church. Welcome back, Aaron.
It's good to be here.
Good. And part of what we're going to be talking about this morning is the issue of unplanned pregnancies and the way people deal with those pregnancies here in our area. People carry strong opinions about what should happen and what is the responsibility of someone when they become pregnant. And we know that it's legal here in our country to, practice lots of different options. Some of those that we would, applaud as people of faith, and sometimes we may have problems with them as people of faith. But how do we talk about those things, and what are some of the choices and the options here in our area? What can people look for from us in terms of that kind of support? So we'll be right back after this Mercy Minute. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, I'm Angie Saprito with Mercy Hospital. I'm here today with Dr. Jeff Manley. Dr. Manley, what do you do here?
OBGYN physician.
All right, and your office is located where?
We're in the hospital clinic complex, I guess, if you will, and it's on the 5th floor, just right down from labor and delivery.
So it's convenient to be down the hall from labor and delivery, but also what are the benefits of that?
Well, being in the same place makes it just safer for our babies, safer for our moms, because the physician's always in the same building, just a few steps down the hallway.
And our labor and delivery rooms, they deliver everything in the same room.
It's nice, yeah. They are able to deliver, and their postpartum recovery is all in the same room. There's room there for family and to stay the night as well. So everybody gets to stay in the same place, which is a nice added benefit.
Right across the hall from our NICU.
It's just right across the hall from the NICU.
And you're accepting new patients. If you'd like to make an appointment, you can call the number on your screen or visit mercy.net for more information.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm here with Aaron Brown, who's the lead pastor over at St. Paul's United Methodist Church, and this morning we're talking about the issues surrounding pregnancies, planned or unplanned, and what are people's options at those moments. It's 43 years ago, a little over 43 years now, here in our country, where abortion became legal. And certainly from the Catholic viewpoint, that's one of those things that we fight very strongly and very loudly against. We don't think that abortion should be legal, and part of our position for that is that we believe that life in the womb, the only thing it lacks is growth and development before it's a full human being, and we believe it needs to be protected even when it's not well developed, even when it doesn't have a voice, even when it doesn't have any rights. And that's one of the reasons why we kind of go after things the way that we do.
Right.
I know that now I'm going to tell you that I am well aware that not everybody in my congregation completely feels that way, but that is our official position and our official way. How about you encountering that from the Methodist side of things?
Right. The United Methodist doctrine on abortion is that we do not support or believe that it is a contraceptive method, that the only times that we think that it should be considered is in cases of rape or incest.
Right. And we would even, in those situations, even while I can say that I certainly can be understanding that someone feels that they need to make that choice in those instances, and I can certainly be understanding about that, we would still even say that in those cases it's still not, it
not a viable option.
Yeah, it's not an option for us, just simply because we still believe that that once that second life is already in existence, the way we see it, we wouldn't want to do anything to impinge upon that.
Right.
And that becomes a tricky thing, because I know people wind up in all kinds of situations, and the one thing I think that everybody in the debate could agree upon is that we wish that abortion were as infrequent as possible.
Right.
Right. And again, these are topics for other shows. I would love to talk about education for trying to keep people not to be in those spots.
Right.
But sometimes people wind up in a situation where they have an unplanned pregnancy, and they feel the pressure And so part of the deal for us is, I think as people of faith, is we got to provide for all those people who are in that spot plenty of options, okay? I mean, I know that they've got the legal option for abortion, and right now I can't do anything about that, all right? But what I want to make sure that we're doing as people of faith is making sure that there are lots of options out there so that people don't feel like this is their only option because of the pressures that they're undergoing because of suddenly having to deal with something that was not on their horizon or not in their plan.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, one of the things that makes me think about, if somebody comes to me, a young woman or a couple, and says, "Hey, you know, we didn't plan this. We're considering all our options. What guidance do you?" Number one, that often doesn't happen because people, when they're making those decisions, they're very seldom open to having conversations about it. They want to have that. If they're going to decide to terminate a pregnancy, they want to kind of decide that on their own, oftentimes. But if people do come to me and are asking questions like that in those rare occasions, I think my starting point is always one of grace.
Sure.
And trying to be understanding, trying to offer a sense of hope and possibility rather than a sense of judgment and anything like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I've dealt with students who've been in this situation. I've dealt with parishioners who've been in this situation, and all of them. It breaks my heart for them because I see how much they're struggling. And one of the things that I think that anybody who has come to us in those situations are going to find that for the most part we're going to be fairly compassionate and again try to help them to figure out their options. Now my experience in many ways is I know that when when Catholics come to me, they know what my position is going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, they know what my position is going to be, at least in terms of the theoretical. And then, so many of them I think actually come so that I can give them those other options, so that I can give them other choices, so that they don't, because they know that I'm not going to, they know that no matter what happens, I'm not going to be able to say, oh, I think that's a good choice, or I think that's I can't. If they choose to do it, that's fine, and I'm still going to love them, and I'll still find a place for them. But at the same time, they're going to know, and I think many of them actually come because I'm going to give them other viable options and know that they're going to get the support that they need. Or like one of my students comes and says, how am I going to tell people about this? How am I going to tell my family? How am I going to tell my people? And I'm just like, well, I'll go with you. I'll be there to support you.
And that's one of the best things when people are in crisis of any sort, particularly what we're talking about right here, is to know that they've got somebody on their side that is there to help interpret, to support, to guide in the best possible ways.
Right, and there are so many resources, and we're blessed in our community, obviously. We got one of the best groups in the area in Life Choices, because Life Choices really does, everybody says, well, do you have your own crisis pregnancy center there in Joplin? I said, well, I don't need to start one, okay? They're already doing the work, it's all good. And they do phenomenal work.
They do.
And again, their whole point there is they're not to pass judgment on people, and they don't. They're phenomenal staff. I love those people over there. They're great staff. And they basically just help people as they're trying to think their way through sometimes what would be a really tough situation, and just support them as they try to figure out what they're going to do.
To make sure that people understand exactly what those options are and what's going on for a young woman in her body and what's going on there. What I also think Life Choices does very well that very few other places do is talk to the young men. And say, here's what it looks like to be a father. Here's what's happening. Here's what's going on, and here's what your options are.
And one of the other things I think they're phenomenal at is making sure that our young people, if they're gonna, exercise, that their option to be sexually active, they also teach them to make sure that they're not. They're not going to make long-term, decisions that are going to suddenly impinge their lives in ways that they had no idea. Introduce the education in those pieces, and again, get our young people to realize that they have choices to make, and enable them to make those choices with, the right information and with the right support, before they get into a situation. they're going to help them make those decisions long before they ever get to that moment where they might choose to be sexually active or not. I mean, that's going to be, again, their option, but they give them that information and they work with them to help them figure out how they want to make their choices in life, which again, I think is super important in terms of those
and Life
things.
Choices does a great job of educating people, not just in the situations, but educating our young people all across the four-state area.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, some people will, I've done a lot of campus ministry, I've done a lot of work on campuses, over the years, and I'm always, forever have been asked to do panels and all that stuff as to why, I'm against abortion and do those things. I'm going to give you my quick, my down and dirty, what I consider my big pitch, and that is that I don't want anybody valuing somebody's life because they either don't have enough money or don't have enough power or because they fit some particular category. So I usually, a lot of times, I'd be going to a panel discussion and I'd be working with, young women who were bound and determined that they were going to fight with me. And I have no desire to fight with people. I'll stand up for my position, but I don't want to fight with people. So they'd just be like saying, it's just like, well, you can't tell me what to do with my body. And I said, here's the deal. For the same reason that I'm a feminist, I'm also against abortion. And they just kind of look at me like, huh? And I'd say, well, no, seriously. I don't think somebody should tell you what to do with your body because you're a woman. I don't think you should be manipulated by anybody else as to, to do those things. I think that you have your dignity and you have your worth, and it's certainly not because me, the man, or the priest, or anybody else is saying that you got that dignity or that worth. I think you've got it just because you are who you are. But I said, for the same reason I'm going to fight for your rights, those are the same reasons I'm going to fight for the right of that life in the womb. Because I said, you don't want to be disvalued because you're female. You don't want to be disvalued because somebody else is trying to tell you what to do. I just want you to take the same situation and think about that for that life in the womb. That just because that life in the womb doesn't have a voice and doesn't have any power, I don't want somebody telling that life in the womb what it's worth either. And so then we're off into a completely different discussion, about how do we do those things, how do we care for each other, how do we take care of the inherent dignity of every human being, and I really am about that. I mean, I don't think people should be telling young women they're not worth as much as young men, and I don't think people, that undeveloped life in the womb should be told what it's worth versus somebody who's got clout and power, whether it's somebody's father telling her to do something or whether it's her trying to make that decision for herself to say, how am I going to get along in life to figure out how I'm going to move forward in my life at this particular moment when this suddenly is an issue that I get to deal with.
Yeah, one of the thoughts that I've had for quite a while is when it comes to abortion, it makes me think of the words of Jesus. He said, I was a stranger and you welcomed me, in context. And when I think about abortion in an unborn child, I think, who could be more of a stranger than an unborn child? And how do we welcome that child? And I think that, to me, leads into the thought of adoption and the importance of adoption and considering adoption rather than abortion.
Well, and I know that when we come back here in a minute, I do want to talk to you about that because I know that you and your wife have adopted.
Yes.
And I know that, when you start talking about that, you take on a special sparkle, and I want to give you a chance to do that when we get into this next section as a very viable and a very good choice. But right now, we just need to kind of move to our break. This is Faith in Our Hometown, and we'll be right back.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service of Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
And welcome back. Aaron, right before the break, we were talking a little bit about adoption, and we were talking about that as a very viable option, and welcoming the stranger, to use the words of Jesus. You and your wife had a chance to adopt. Why don't you share that story with everybody and with me?
Right. Well, the story for us is that we have an older daughter, and always saw ourselves as having 2 kids. So, but we were unable to conceive that second child for mysterious reasons, and so we began to consider consider sort of silently adoption, what that might look like, my prayer literally was, God, I don't feel comfortable with this idea of adoption, but if you want us to adopt a child, you're going to have to put a baby literally right in front of us. And that is,
you went ahead and challenged God, didn't you?
that is exactly what happened. One Sunday, a woman arrives in church with a little bassinet and says, God told me to tell you need to adopt this baby. So that began the process for us of adoption and the people that we worked with. And so for us, it is very much a God story. But that idea for us of what does it look like? What is the definition of family? We so often think, well, family is biological, but our understanding from Scripture and our understanding of Christian community is that family is so much deeper and richer than just the genetic bonds that we have.
Sure.
And how were we as a family going to embrace that? And it happened through adoption. And we're so grateful that our daughter's birth mother didn't decide to terminate her pregnancy, but at some point she decided, I think this child can be a blessing in someone else's family, a part of that family.
Yeah, one of my cousins adopted many years ago because, again, they tried and for whatever reason just couldn't seem to be able to conceive. And so they went through the process. They adopted their first daughter, and so Melanie came along. It was a great Thanksgiving. She came into our family, 2 days before Thanksgiving, and of course, Thanksgiving got to meet the new cousin, and all that kind of good stuff. But I have to laugh because after that, Debbie and Rich started having their own kids. So they had 7 more of their own, okay? Once they got it started, at one point in time I was teasing.
I hear that a lot. A lot of adopted families have that same thing happen.
I was teasing Deb at one point in time, and I said, Deb, you have figured out how this works now. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I think I can tell you how this works if you really want to. And she started laughing, and she said, oh, no. No. She said, I prayed to God that if he'd ever let me get pregnant, I was just going to let him be in control of it all, and that was it. And so she said, now that we've had, 8 of our, they did have 8. I kept saying that they were eventually going to work for a baseball team, but I guess with, all that kind of stuff. But she said once they got it started, they were just leaving it alone, leaving it in God's hands, which I was just like, now there was an act of faith. But, she's super mom. But again, Melanie's been the quintessential big sister and has been just as much part of that family. And again, very grateful again on behalf of our family that Melanie's there.
One thing that I find interesting in kids that are adopted is a comment that gets said often by those adopted children. When they're little, they'll be talking about when they have their family and start their family. And a number of parents have told me that their adopted children will say, when I adopt my children, this is what we're going to do in our family. And so that it becomes a kind of a norm of knowing what family means, that it transcends biology.
Well, and it is. Family is, and those bonds of love transcend a lot of things if we let it. And I'm just grateful that a lot of families let that happen, because there are a lot of kids out there that need adoption, and there are a lot of families out there that have longed for children, and that seems to be part of the plan as to how they wind up growing their families.
Yeah, and I so if people are watching this right now and wondering, well, how do I get in the process? There are a lot of international adoption agencies. In fact, I'm not sure what the figures are of how many kids are adopted from overseas into the United States, but I would say that a large portion of adoptions that happen, so they can get connected with an overseas. One of the other ways that a lot of people in this area begin the adoption process is by being trained as foster parents, and opening up their home to kids that are, sort of in a temporary need, but a lot of times in that temporary situation, things happen, and it can become more permanent if foster parents see that. As well as the foster system sees that. But a lot of ways to open up the possibility.
And we are always, I've never ever talked to folks who work in child care for the state who say that, we got plenty of foster parents. No, there's always a need for foster parents. There's always a need for more folks to be trained and for more folks to be able to open their family to some of those other situations of other families that are in crisis. Again, I think that for us as pastors, it's that reminder that there are always options, that there are always resources. I can't imagine somebody coming up, to us in a crisis situation where we wouldn't try to help them to figure out who else do you need to talk to and how can we figure out what these other options are.
Right. And I think that is the Christian response. When we look at Christianity, it is that sense of community, that interwoven sense that should somebody have an unplanned pregnancy, the idea of the church rallying around that person to say, hey, because one of the greatest fears of particularly a single young woman who is pregnant is, how am I going to raise this child? And that's where I think the responsibility of the Christian community is to rally around them and say, you are not on your own. We are in this together and always have been, and we will help you to raise. That's what baptism is, at least in our tradition. It isn't just, we don't necessarily do private baptisms because it's an act of community where the community steps up and says, we're gonna help raise this child, and we do this together. And in an actuality, in our collective tradition is to say we're kind of even though maybe you birthed this child belongs to the community, and we're going to loan the child to you in order to raise, and we're going to be watching you as parents. I mean, not in a big brother sort of sense,
right? But
the idea is that we're in this together, that we raise our children together, that we're going to welcome the stranger into our midst, whether that stranger was planned or not.
Right. I sometimes take a little heat at St. Peter's because I just tell people the norm is we baptize during Sunday liturgies. And some parents or people that moved in from outside the community, they look at me like, what do you mean we always do this at Sunday liturgy? And I'm just like, yeah, we get new kids. It's part of the community celebration for us to be able to baptize them in the Sunday assembly.
Liturgy means the work of the people, does it not?
Yep.
So part of the work of the people is to welcome those kids and raise them up. Yeah.
And
when we do a baptism at our church, one of the things I ask the congregation is, okay, so we're baptizing this child into our community of faith here. Will you be there to help nurture this kid and be Sunday school teachers and youth leaders and role models and mentors along the journey? If you will, say we will. And that it is a collective community to say, we're ready to welcome this child into our midst.
And I always chuckle too because you always hear the horror stories about.
I didn't
the
think Catholic priests chuckled. You chuckle?
I do. I chuckle a lot.
Or chortle?
All of it.
All of it.
All
okay.
of it. And most of the time, one of the things that I chuckle and chortle at the most are the kids in the congregation because their parents are trying to corral them or do those things. And of course, where I'm sitting, I get to see it all, and I love it. I mean, I just love it. We were doing baptism the other day, and I just said, God love you all. I said, I'm so glad you keep having these kids so that I don't have to, since I can't have any of my own, I'm glad you're having them all so that I get to enjoy them all and to share them with you. And so I said to all of them, I said this is like 4 baptisms at 4 different celebrations in about 6 weeks. You just keep having those kids. And the mother in the front row, of course, that was number 4. She was just like, no more. And I'm like, hey, you guys are just going to have to take it as it plays, and you'll figure it out. But it's a community action, and I think that's also. And again, I think that expands even beyond our church families. I mean, that's the reason why if anybody comes to the door and is looking for, some advice or some assistance or, some kind of, guidance for some reason, I don't just take care of the Catholics who come to the door, and I bet you don't either. You don't just take care of the Methodists who come to the door.
Right?
You take care of the people who come to the door. That's what it is to be an extended family. And again, in our collective traditions, we take that sense of larger family very, very seriously. And that's why I really, truly believe that in any of these situations, when somebody's in whether it's a crisis, whether it's a planned pregnancy, an unplanned pregnancy, we want to support the folks in whatever they're going through. Sometimes we've got to help people through shock. Sometimes we've got to help people through acceptance. Sometimes we got to help people through, just the disappointment because that's happened. And then other times we get to welcome them and celebrate with them through the joy and, that they've longed for this or that they planned for this or they've done all these things through the years. That becomes, again, a very essential moment for us as a community of faith to welcome and to embrace and to help people in whatever that next stage is going to be.
And sometimes, you kind of mentioned this, but sometimes that next stage or phase is offering forgiveness and grace and mercy. There have been a number of times when people have talked to me and feeling a really heavy weight of guilt because they have had an abortion. And to be able to talk to them and say, this, in my view, this was not God's will, But at the same time, what I do know about God's will is that He offers us grace and He offers us mercy and new beginnings.
Yeah. And I mean, nobody in life deserves to be defined by their worst moment in life.
Yeah, well said.
Nobody deserves to be, trapped in a spot where everybody's going to define you by a mistake or any of those things. I don't think God does that for us.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer in the fact that many times is what we have to do is we have to help people past that so that they know what to do. I am a firm believer that the resources are there.
Yeah.
I believe that most of the time if people come to the door, we will be able to help them figure out what their options and what their choices are. And by us, having the opportunity to do that, I think we're all greater blessed by it, and the community's greater blessed because of the choices that we can offer each other as a larger family of faith. So,
yeah, and I think a lot of folks that probably might be listening to this, watching, would maybe be refreshed by a sense that, hey, we're not in the business of condemning. We're in the business of offering hope and help and counsel.
And healthy choices for what we're going to do after that. I'll be right back after this Mercy Minute.
Hi, I'm Angie Saporito with Mercy Hospital. I'm here today with Dr. Stephen Meyer, cardiovascular surgeon with Mercy. Hi, Dr. Meyer. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So we've talked a little bit about the vein clinic, and what is that exactly?
That is minimally invasive treatment for people with varicose veins.
So, and it's an outpatient procedure, right?
Those are outpatient procedures, and it's all done in the office under local or just no anesthesia at all.
So could varicose veins, could that be something that's hazardous to your health?
Many people worry. They come in and ask about could their varicose veins lead to pulmonary embolism or things like that. Typically they do not, but they can lead to secondary effects such as pain, local irritation, swelling, ulcers, things like that.
So if you have a concern or you'd like to get that taken care of, you can call the number on your screen. It'll be easy to get right in, visit with your physician, and we'll be happy to see you. Thank you.
Well, welcome back to Faith in Our Hometown. This morning, I've been talking with Aaron Brown from St. Paul's United Methodist about pregnancies, planned or unplanned. What's the role of the community in that? What do we do to assist people, especially in those moments when that's not happy news, but is difficult news? And we both very much agreed that as a community of faith, part of what we have to do is support people in those moments. Not with judgment, not with condemnation, not with all kinds of things, but to say, okay, what can we do to help you at this point in time? How can we help you at this moment to move forward in your life with the challenges that are yours because of this situation? It's about choices, and it's about giving people choices, and it's about supporting them to do that. We've also want one more shout out to Life Choices here in the area to help us to do that. It's always a good thing, and the work and the service that they do. But we are here and talking about how to support people in our community, which is all a part about living here in our greater Joplin area. This is Faith in Our Hometown. We'll hope you join us again next week. God bless.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. here on KSN. Brought to you as a community service by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.